Speaking of schedules and guys who are going to need to make some drives, Elias Lindholm. Let's pull up this tweet, Grady. This was right before the show went to air. We get this tweet from Chris Johnston with the Canucks believed to be among those pursuing Jake Guentzel. Folks, we talked about him yesterday. Word is they've had discussions about potentially flipping Elias Lindholm to the Bruins as part of the machinations to make it happen. Nothing concrete in place at this time. Still lots of moving parts. Harm, I'm gonna be honest with you. I yesterday said on this show that I could imagine the Canucks going out and getting Sidney Crosby because this management regime just always keeps you on your toes and you should be ready for anything. So PJ asked, "Could you imagine if Sidney Crosby was in Vancouver?" And I said, "Yeah, I actually can imagine it. Like I can imagine it." I did not imagine the Canucks flipping Elias Lindholm. I really didn't. I really didn't expect to see this. And with 3 days to go till the deadline on Friday, here we are. Elias Lindholm, potentially, of course, nothing's happened yet, to the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I'm in wait and see mode. Honestly, this is pretty shocking. One thing I will say is Rutherford has a history where he doesn't get tied to his own moves. Some managers, when they pay a lot for a player, they feel the need to then make themselves look good. But Rutherford will quickly admit if he thinks he's made a mistake and rectify it. I mean, I think back to, for example, David Perron in January 2015. He was a marquee midseason acquisition for the Penguins. A year later, they flipped him for Carl Hagelin, who obviously ended up playing a huge part in the Stanley Cups over there. Of course, the difference there is they gave Perron a full year. Whereas here, we're talking about just a month for Elias Lindholm. I do wonder if part of the thought process, if they go down this route, is Tocchet has said that he thinks Elias Lindholm and Elias Pettersson are both best served at center. You're not going to move JT Miller from center considering the year he's had and him being their best forward. So if you're committed to three centers down the middle, you're essentially having Lindholm in your 3C spot with holes on your wings. So unless you think there's a scenario where Lindholm can get back to being a fit on Pettersson or Miller's wing, that would be the potential reason why you consider flipping Lindholm. Because I'll be honest, watching him in Calgary, the tape from earlier this season, he's only been decent all year. Now, the reason we were hyping up the acquisition when the Canucks made the trade is because, at least for me, I was thinking, well, he's got subpar line mates for being a player in a top six position. And if he comes to Vancouver, you shift him to the wing. Now he's got an elite playmaker to play with. If he's on Pettersson or Miller's wing, now all Elias Lindholm has to do is be a trigger man for you. But the whole sort of way this works, the logic behind it is he has to fit with Pettersson or Miller. So that would be the debate the Canucks have to go through right now internally is, do they think Elias Lindholm can get back to the type of form, something closer resembling what he did with Calgary when he was on a line with Tkachuk and Gaudreau?
And look, you just keep coming back to it. The whole point of the Elias Lindholm trade was to find a winger for Elias Pettersson. Like, it was to find a winger for Elias Pettersson. Has not worked out to this point. We had this tweet from Jeff Patterson talking about Elias Lindholm's timeline a little bit here. A summary of Elias Lindholm's month with the Canucks. 2 goals in his debut. Wing with Elias Pettersson, center with Elias Pettersson, power play 1, power play 2, a game with Miller and Besser, the center of his own line, playing with AHL call-ups, good on faceoffs, plenty of penalty kill time, and now floated as a piece on the way out the door to Boston. This one from Nar in the YouTube live chat. I love this comment. Nobody told Lindholm he was on a PTO.
Well, it is wild, right? Like,
yeah.
How many general managers, again, this is all potentially, right? We don't know for sure if this is going to happen, but how many general managers would even go down the thought process of considering this?
Not many. It's the same. It's the same as the Pettersson negotiations, man. It's the exact same as the Pettersson negotiations. Like, how many general managers would consider, going up to your star prize possession and be like, "Hey, we're gonna have to trade you if you don't sign," and like in the middle of the season. So look, we don't make me pull up the tweet again of Rutherford and his wheelbarrow. Don't make me bring it up again, man. Don't make me do it again. But look, it's crazy to think about that we're kind of at this stage where this is even a conversation that we're having. And somebody yesterday in our chat threw out the idea of flipping Elias Lindholm, and he said that has to be Rutherford's burner. And it was so funny because PJ and I read it on air, and PJ was like, no, it's not going to happen. And like I said at the start of the show, I didn't think it was going to happen either. I'm like, no, you got to let him figure it out, blah, blah, blah. Then we get this report today, and he is in the chat. He's talking his crap, and I love it. Unplugged says, I knew it. I asked yesterday if Lindholm should be flipped, and Patrick Johnson said no. Unplugged, you better be in the chat tomorrow until PJ acknowledges you. PJ is going to be back for Harmon tomorrow. I'll make sure that we read that comment on air. You make sure you're in the chat tomorrow, Unplugged. This is good. Get your anyone else's in, folks. We've got a few here. We've got a new... Yeah, go on.
Just to quickly say, I mean, Out of Price said the same thing yesterday too, just because teams don't do that. How many times have you seen a high profile rental ad and a month later you're like, nah, I don't like this toy, I'm throwing it away?
Dude, I'm thinking about the fact that like Edmonton and Vegas, right? Those two teams that are, they're in on Guentzel, they're the front runners. They were probably like, all right, we missed out on Lindholm, but now the Canucks are done. Like the Canucks are out of the way. At least it's just between us. And then Jim Rutherford opens up his phone and he's like, no, actually, we're going to send Lindholm to Boston so he's away from all of you. And then we're also going to go get the next target you want. And who knows? Then they're going to flip Guentzel for the next biggest target until all of them are away from Edmonton and Vegas. Just keep them out of Edmonton and Vegas. That's a hell of a strategy. Just weaken your playoff opponent's ability to do anything at the trade deadline by trading for all the guys. Yeah, this is wild. I honestly, again, obviously we're in wait and see mode. I would still be surprised if this, if we see, I don't even think it's a three-way trade. Like I think it's going to be two different trades where the Canucks then use the prospects they had from the Boston trade. Like, I saw JD Burke threw this out as well, like a Fabian Lysell. You go out and get him and you flip him to the Penguins for Guentzel because the Penguins are looking for a certain, probably a certain caliber of prospect that the Canucks don't have or just don't want to part with. We've kind of heard Willander, Lekarmaki, and Elias Pettersson 2.0. Both of those guys are kind of on the untouchables list for this management regime, and Podkolzin and Ratu just aren't that caliber that like a guy like Lysell probably is. So that's the thinking behind it. We had someone asking why they would even be doing this. That's why. It's so that they can go get the assets that they would need to go make a Jake Guentzel trade. And I know it's crazy. You had Jim Benning for 11 years, and Jim Benning's still rewinding this show and rereading the tweets to try to figure out what's going on. This is unbelievable. Like we're seeing a management, I don't want to call it a masterclass because it hasn't happened yet, but we're just seeing these ideas that you don't even throw out there because it doesn't happen. Like it doesn't happen often, and now we're seeing it. And hell, you definitely don't want to call it a masterclass because giving up assets for Elias Lindholm and then trading him for what you assume to be less and then going out and getting another rental isn't quite a masterclass, but it is respectable, I think, that this management regime is so willing to just say, yeah, you know what? This isn't working out the way we wanted it to, and we want our team to be better and best suited for the playoffs more than anything.
That's the other factor is I'd be interested if they do make this push for Guentzel. It's obviously going to be expensive. Do you see the possibility of being able to re-sign him long-term? It's going to be tight. It's not going to be easy by any means, but if you were to, for instance, find a way to get off Mikheyev's contract and you decided, okay, we love Connor Garland, but we like Jake Guentzel more because he's a true top-line difference maker. The combined impact of those two, of shedding those two contracts, you could probably fit them onto the books next season. Now, the challenge, of course, then is you also got to figure out how to construct a blue line and replenish your bottom six. But the point I'm trying to make is it's not like an immediate, there's no chance you'd be able to re-sign him. And I do wonder how much the contract aspect and can you control him beyond the season as a rental will affect how the Canucks feel about whether it's worth it to look to try and flip Lindholm elsewhere and then potentially pay a premium to bring Guentzel in. I
also look at it this way, and I look at it through the lens of Boston. Like, Boston makes a lot of sense for Lindholm. Like, have you seen Boston's center depth? They've got Pavel Zacha on the first line, and that's not a knock on Pavel Zacha, but how much more do you like Pavel Zacha if he's your second or third line center, right? Like, the Bruins don't have much, and again, they're winning, right? They're winning, but I even saw someone throw it out on Twitter today. They posted a picture of the Bruins lineup on Daily Faceoff, the line combination. Like, how is this team winning anything? They've got like Jesper Boqvist in the 4C role. They just it's crazy. It's a band of misfits, and they come together, and somehow they're winning things. But Lindholm makes a ton of sense for them. I honestly like, again, I don't think it's going to be a sign and we'll get him to an extension immediately, but if Lindholm does get traded to Boston, or hell, even if he hits free agency, I could 100% see Boston as one of the teams that's kind of in on him and would like to get him signed.
Yeah, I think a big reason Boston's been able to make it work anyway to this point is because Charlie Coyle has been pretty unbelievable. Like, he was the type of player I looked at and went, he's a good third line center. I don't like him above the lineup, but he's played at a legit top 6 caliber level, which is what's allowed Boston to maintain success. The one thing from Boston's perspective is they'd have to wonder too, is he not that Lindholm's washed, but is he a true 1C on a contending team?
Absolutely.
Because how much of an upgrade is Lindholm on Zacha and Coyle? Because Zacha and Coyle are not top line centermen, but is Elias Lindholm at this point, considering that it wasn't the best year for him in Calgary, considering he hasn't necessarily fit in Vancouver yet. So even from Boston's perspective, it would be a bit high risk, but there's no doubt that they really do need a true top line center, I think, to be bona fide cup contenders.
And hey, if you look at it from Boston's perspective, like, this is a good way to get an audition and see how he would fit before you go out and commit a bunch of money to him in free agency. So, like, obviously there's value in this for the Bruins too, if of course this gets done, and we don't know for sure that it will. So let's try not to spend much more time talking about it. But funny enough, that's all people are talking about in the YouTube live chat. So we don't have anyone else's. We've got more about Guentzel. Captain Canuck asked this. If the Canucks get Guentzel, does that mean they'll be completely tapped out? Could they still get Greenway and some grit? I don't know about Jordan Greenway specifically, but like, going out and getting Jake Guentzel doesn't mean you can't go get a bottom 6 forward that you really like.
Yeah, and I think the key would have to be, like, you can move some pieces around, so long as you're willing to expose some of your depth players to waivers. Obviously, if you're bringing Guentzel in, we're presuming that they're also sending Lindholm out, and the disparity in terms of the salary you're adding is just over $1 million. So you're still going to have some flexibility to make depth additions. I don't think you'd necessarily be tapped out. And here's the thing too, is there's just so much creativity in the NHL these days for how you can make salary work. Not that I think the Canucks would go down this route, but we've seen a number of teams double retain and you bring a guy in at a quarter of his cap hit. So there are ways to get creative. I don't think you'd be tapped out if you're the Canucks if you find a way to get Guentzel.
All right, I wanted to bring this up. As the title suggests, Rogers Arena is getting cup holders. We saw that. Rogers Arena is getting cup holders. They're getting all new seats, all new black seats in the upper and lower bowl with cup holders. Harm, when's the last time you like sat at Rogers Arena?
It's for the Pittsburgh game, actually. Before that, it had been like 10 years.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, I don't remember ever, like, I've heard complaints. I know people don't like the color of them, but like, I don't really remember the seats having a problem with them. But like, we sit there for morning skate, and I like the seats for morning skate. You think about that, like, we sit there during morning skate. I like those seats.
I'll say that, yes, but also I'm not gonna lie. I watched morning skate from Crypto.com Arena, and boy, they got black leather, like cushiony seats, and they're really nice. Like, I sat down and I was like, man, this is almost like sitting on a couch. So the Rogers Arena seats, I mean, they've been fine, but when you go around other rinks, especially this LA one, you're like, okay, there's a difference when it comes to these like really premium new seats.
I'm excited to check it out. I sat in the VIP seats, so the new one the Canucks have for a morning skate. I went a couple rows lower than we usually do, and I sat in the black VIP seats, and those are awesome. I don't think those are going to be the ones that are coming in. I don't think it's that model of seat, because that would really diminish their VIP section if they made every seat like that in the building. But we are getting cup holders in the building, so we'll have to see what's in store there. $150 million arena upgrade. Is what that's all a part of. And obviously we saw the Jumbotron and all that sort of stuff. And this is another thing that I wanted to bring up in anyone else before we wrap up here. This is from Rick Tockett yesterday, and I told you about this. I think you were there. Credit to the Canucks Twitter account. This is where we got this video. Grady, let's hear Rick Tockett talking about the Canucks trade deadline strategy, and then Ian McIntyre asks him about Sidney Crosby. Ian McIntyre read my mind.
Looking ahead outside of the games, trade deadline is Friday. I wonder how much you talk with Patrick and Jim at a point like this about what they're thinking and about your assessment of the needs.
Well, I think throughout the year the communication is great. Patrick and I have a great, relationship and communicate. So he knows what we're trying to do, and I know what he's trying to do. And about this time of year, he'll bounce some ideas. They talk about players all the time. I mean, that's their job. But most of the time, I just kind of worry about players in my room right now.
Can you get Sydney for you?
What's that?
Can you get Sydney?
Pittsburgh North.
I don't want to tamper. No, I'm just,
That's a smart answer.
See the smile on his face, Harm? You see the smile on Rick Talk's face? Like, and he didn't want to tamper, not to make the second Jim Benning mention in the show today. He didn't want to get a tampering fine, but he did bring it up. And man, I don't know, man. I
Won't
want
read too much into it.
I want Sidney Crosby in Vancouver so badly, Harmon. I want it so badly. Like, get that guy out of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going absolutely nowhere. I get it. He's gonna go down with the ship. He's arguably in my opinion, definitely my generation, greatest captain in NHL history for what I've seen, from at least the ones I've seen coached. And people are gonna be like, "Oh, what about this guy from 1932?" I don't know much about that guy. Okay, so my apologies if I offended anyone out there, but Sidney Crosby, in my opinion, is the greatest captain. Well, obviously Wayne Gretzky's up there as well, but Sidney Crosby, I really like me some Sidney Crosby. So, yeah, I just want
to real hot take. You love Sidney Crosby.
I just want the guy in Vancouver, man. And Corey Anderson making a good point. He doesn't want to leave, Quads. That's a great point, Corey, but I like the point made by Nar in the comment below where he said, manifest Crosby. That's
Dude,
what I'm doing.
if it's anywhere, it's got to be Colorado.
Yeah, that's what I was coming in
way better
to say.
fit.
Yeah.
Why?
Dude, he gets to play with Nathan McKinnon, his
Cole Harbor,
buddy,
baby.
And he gets to slot in as a 2C.
But I don't cover the Avs.
And they need a center.
They do need a center, but I need Sidney Crosby in Vancouver. I think that's what you guys are misinterpreting. Is I don't care how he fits on the Canucks. I care that he'd be in Vancouver and I would get to cover Sidney Crosby in my career.
And he loves him some Rick Tocchet. And Rutherford and Alvin love them some Sidney Crosby.
That's right. UFA in 2 years. He's going to be 38 when he's a UFA. I assume that's probably going to be his last contract. But hey, maybe he takes a 1 year deal and wins it up in Vancouver.
You should start penning a letter to the Penguins organization and Sid, be like, hey, I really want to cover you in Vancouver. So even though you want to stay in Pittsburgh, just reconsider.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually what I will do. I will do that. I'll write a letter. I actually might write it.
Can you please actually write like a mock letter?
Dear Fenway Sports Group.
Dear Fenway Sports Group, stop screwing up the Red Sox. Although I don't like the Red Sox. So anyways, okay.
Oh, I shouldn't have brought that up. We almost had no baseball.
Not getting into it. But Fenway Sports Group, they love them some Penguins. Anyways, okay, here we go.
I've got a baseball reference.
Oh, you do?
You're gonna kill me. I was thinking about this. I think I actually dreamed about this last night. I'm not joking. I was looking at Nils Hoglander's stats the other day, and I think he's got 19 goals and 8 assists. So I was thinking, oh, that's the old Cy Young stat line.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God, like that's a baseball reference.
Yes. I'm getting through to you, Harm. I'm turning you into a vibes guy, and slowly but surely I'm turning you into a baseball guy. Okay, Captain Canuck said, Quads manifested Lindholm. He can get us Sid too. I don't know. Lindholm didn't really work out, so maybe you don't want me manifesting trades, but I think you do want me manifesting Sidney Crosby. And Nick P threw this out there. I reject your reality and substitute my own. Corey Anderson, forget your legacy, Sid. I want to cover you here in Vancouver. That's going to be one of the lines in my letter for sure. Yeah, he ain't leaving. He ain't leaving Pittsburgh. That's what it comes down to. But if he is, he's coming to Vancouver because that's where I want him to go. So anyways, no new news.
I wanted to read this question from Karan or Conversation.
Karan. I learned it's
sorry.
Karan.
Yeah. Well, I'm so confused now. He says, even with a healthy Susie, do we think the decor needs adding, especially on the right side? And if this deal goes through with Pittsburgh, Harm, I'm wondering, and I know Drance supports this, would Chad Ruedel, now I know he's a depth guy, but they've had him in the past, Rutherford and Alvin. He's playoff tested. The acquisition cost isn't going to be much. So would that be the kind of depth move to make, upgrade over Mark Freeman. Could you see that Chad Ruhwedel being part of that package?
Yeah, I've said before that with the blue line, I don't think you're going to find that true top four difference maker, especially now that Tanev's off the market. So really, you're just looking for extra reinforcements, an upgrade on Friedman. And yeah, I have time for Ruhwedel. He hasn't necessarily had the best season this year, but he's been really effective in years past. And I absolutely think he's a clear upgrade on Friedman.
I just don't know if they're like. I really don't think they're going to trade for a defenseman. I just think when you look at what this team really needs, I just think they need wingers so much more than they need defensemen.
You can do both though. Like the acquisition cost to get depth, you're not looking more than what, like a fifth at the highest level.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Right.
You might, yeah.
And you never can have enough defensemen going into a playoff round.
That's
and
very true.
If you really have to turn the keys over to Mark Friedman to step in, oof. And he's been fine, and no disrespect for him, but you want to make sure you're going into a playoff series with the best roster possible.
Yep, that's absolutely fair.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.